Hello. Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for today's uplifting presentation, Death, Divorce, and Downsizing, Preserving Your Arts Legacy. I'm Meredith Badler from CBCA, and I am delighted to be joined today by some wonderful experts and artists in the community. But before we turn it over to them, I want to give a shout out to our presenting partners today. So first, I'm going to turn it over to Booker from City of Lafayette.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're so happy to have you here with us today. And we're looking forward to sharing this important information. And I know because of who the panelists are, this will be really interesting and also really helpful. These are important things for all of us to think about because our arts legacies really do matter. All of us are really attached to our artwork and the things that we've collected over time. So this is an important conversation to have. I want to thank the Boulder County Arts Alliance and CBCA for being our additional partners in bringing this to you today. And I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say. Thanks, Meredith.
Thanks, Booker. Appreciate it. And this presentation is really sort of the brainchild of the Boulder County Arts Alliance. They helped envision this program and have been so wonderful bringing to you all today. So Charlotte's on with us if you want to say a little welcome from BCAA.
Sure. Yeah, we're very happy to finally be doing this again. We did the first time in January. It was very popular, successful, and so we're redoing it. Grateful to our sponsor, the Lafayette Cultural Arts Commission, for making it really possible to do. For the past couple of years, they've been a sponsor of ours. We've produced some great programs actually in the collective. We're very much looking forward to going back to the collective in 2021. We hope to do some more workshops and panels. It's really an incredibly gorgeous space, and we're a little envious here in Boulder that Lafayette has such a great space. So check it out when you can get out safely again. I think that's it. I could go on and on. Oh, I should thank the SCFD, the Citizens of the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District. They truly make all this happen. So thank you very much, SCFD.
Wonderful. A few Zoom housekeeping items. We are recording today's presentation. So if you want to rewatch it, if you want to share it, we'll make that video link available to you afterwards. If you're watching this as a recording, hello to you, wherever you are in your time and space. But for those of you that are participating with us live right now on Zoom, we're going to do a little practice. Go ahead and find on the bottom of your Zoom screen your chat box, that lovely chat feature. That's how we'll be getting questions from you throughout today's presentation. We'll also be putting links and resources and other comments into that chat box. So go ahead and practice using it by introducing yourself. Let us know who you are, what you do. We want to make sure we can tailor this presentation to you as best as possible. This is also an opportunity to help build community across our arts region, our arts community. So find your little chat box, introduce yourself, say who you are, what you do, and also use that to share your questions throughout today's presentation. We'll be collecting those as we go, integrating them into the panel conversation, and then we do have quite a bit of time at the end just for Q&A. So that's an opportunity that's available. We also have closed captioning available. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see something that says closed captioning or subtitles. I always forget exactly what it says, but it's there for you if that is helpful. I encourage you to turn your camera off if you'd like, if that helps you focus on the conversation. That's just fine. Do whatever feels best for you. We do, though, ask that you stay muted unless you're sort of called upon to speak. That helps avoid any background noise. And we really are excited about the panelists we have here today and want to make sure they can take center stage. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing our little welcome screen here. And I also have the joy of getting to moderate today's panel. So hello, everyone. As Meredith, I'm the Deputy Director of the CBCA. We do a lot of work across the region to connect arts and business with the arts. One of those programs that we run is called Colorado Attorneys for the Arts. So that's how one of our attorney that's on the panel has gotten connected with us. And we work with some of these other folks to better support our creative economy here in Colorado. So that's me. With us today, we have Elysian Koglmeier, I think I got it right, with Artwork Arthyve. We have Jessie de la Cruz with Arthyve. We have Julie Ratner with the firm of Symons and Ratner. I think I recently changed the name, so you'll correct me, Julie. And then Caroline Douglas, who is a local visual artist and sculptor. And that is our panel today to really talk about preserving your art legacy. What can you do now to prepare and get organized so that going forward, your art can be remembered in the way you want it to be. It can benefit your heirs in the ways that you and they want it to benefit them. Artwork is so personal to anyone who's creative, and we understand that and value that. And there are some really wonderful and frankly not too hard things that you can do now to make sure your legacy is preserved and remembered and truly honored. So that's what we'll be talking about. Excuse me. So what we're going to have first is we've asked each panelist to prepare about a 5-minute or so introduction to who they are and the work and perspective that they bring to this conversation. We'll go through those presentations first, then we'll have a panel conversation with some prepared questions, and then time at the end for Q&A. So that gives me a chance to stop talking for a little bit and turn it over to our wonderful speakers. Up first is Elysian with Artwork Arthyve to tell us a little bit about their work and what they offer. So go ahead, take it away, Elysian.
Great, thank you, Meredith. So you mentioned personal, so I can, how artwork is personal. And so artwork is very personal to me. I am the head of growth at Artwork Arthyve as my day job, but I'm actually the daughter of an artist, art therapist, and my mom is an art educator. So art has always been in my blood. And since graduating from college, have worked in the arts, whether that was running a public art program for New England Foundation for the Arts in Boston, working for various art museums, creating online art classes here in Denver, writing for publications, curating, and now finding my home at Artwork Arthyve, where I've been for the past 3 years. So what is Artwork Arthyve? For those of you that haven't heard of us, we're your neighbor located here in Denver. We're an online art inventory management system that's used by artists all over the world to organize, manage, share, and showcase their artwork. So for the day-to-day business and career planning, but then also for the preserving legacy, making sure your artwork outlasts your lifetime and is part of our cultural heritage at large. We also work with collectors, individual collectors, and organizations with their collections and help them manage them and organize and share and showcase them as well. When asked to be on this panel, thank you, Meredith, and CBCA, Boulder and Lafayette for including me and Artwork Archive, I was thinking about how it's really cool within Artwork Archive, how we do see the lifetime of artwork from the creation by the artist, by working with the artists, and then to see not necessarily a particular artwork, but how art then lives on, how it is purchased by collectors, then gifted to universities, institutions, museums, and how it lives on. So I have some best practices and lessons learned that we have seen from being around for, this is our 10-year birthday. We've been around for 10 years, but like all things in COVID, our 10-year birthday got canceled. So we've been around for 10 years. So we've been working with artists and collectors and organizations for that time. So have seen what I like to joke about is like the good, the bad, and the ugly. So definitely have some best practices along with some common pitfalls to avoid when it comes to this topic. I'm going to share my screen so I can give you some visuals, and it's not just my face. So one of the common pitfalls that we'll probably get into as a group to discuss is all of the work that you have spent so long, bearing your soul and your time and your resources into, to make sure that it doesn't land in a cardboard box, living in an attic, that your estate and your artworks doesn't fall on the shoulders of a family member without a game plan, a map, a roadmap for them to execute, to make sure that all that information can be preserved into the future. So with Artwork Archive as an example, I have I brought ourselves into a demo account of an artist account. There's so much important information to be shared around your artwork. The size, the medium, the creation date, the price that you are selling it for, helpful for your day-to-day business, but also for the details that will live on the provenance of the artwork. So to whom it was sold to, where it was exhibited, what awards it won, all of the information that is attached to your artwork and your career that builds you out, shows you as the successful, wonderful artist that you are, and the importance of the artwork that you are putting out into the world. I actually have a really great quote that I wanted to share from one of our users. So Elizabeth Hewlings is the daughter of the artist Clark Hewlings, who has since passed. And she had a really great quote, which I had written down, and now I can't find it. So I'm going to go and share my screen and read it from one of our articles, which is where I was pulling it from, about the importance of saving information so that it doesn't get lost in the future. So what she said was, back when my dad was alive, a woman called the house and said, I have a painting called Blue Barn. We all thought, that doesn't ring any bells. She sent an image. My father recognized the work, but had called it something else entirely different. So only her dad knew what the painting was. And if he hadn't been there, we would have been at a loss. I thought to myself then, I need a much better way to get a handle on this, because one day that woman is going to call me and I don't want to say, I don't know. So here's a real use case example. And I'm in my 30s, but I still forget things from like 5 years ago. So it's just good to have it in place for the here and now and for the future. So with Artwork Archive being an online inventory system, I'm not going to, belabor you guys with like a long involved demo, but there's just so much information to be saved and tracked that's not just your artwork. You also have your process, your techniques, your materials, your artist statements, everything that makes up the narrative of who you are as a maker that you want to be preserved and to live on along with your artworks. So making sure that you have a system to keep all of that in one place, to be saved, to be shared. And then that can be handled by executors, family members, whomever is carrying on the legacy of your artworks in the future, institutions, etc. So here it's just an object. we have an example of, I saw a request from DU about like donations. Like if you're an artist and donating, here is a private room that you can send along to an institution of artworks as you're planning for the future of your artworks. And as you can see on the left hand nav, your documents, your press, your resume, your CVs, everything that tells the narrative of your work, and being able to put it out into a very concise format to share out like an inventory report or whatever it may be to live on. I keep saying live on, legacy, all these words that will be buzzwords throughout the presentation. And the one thing, one of the questions that Meredith asked that was really great is, what do we want to leave the attendees with, like one word or line of advice? And so if I go back to Artwork Archive, there's a lot here. There's a lot to track. This can seem overwhelming and daunting. Like if you have hundreds upon hundreds of artworks, like how do I get start if I haven't already been using something like Artwork Archive or being organized? And we say to be patient, to take one day at a time, but to start today, to start inventorying to start tracking those details and just biting it off one day at a time, entering information as it's top of mind, maybe working contemporary to backwards, going back to your artwork from, grad school, take a trip down memory lane, but that you can do it. A lot of artists have done it. And what we hear is they wish they had done this, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, last year, that not only helps them preserve their legacy for the future, but manage their business today. And so what we encourage is to start. And then it'll be sent out afterwards, but we have a blog filled with helpful tutorials and articles. And if you look up legacy, we've written about the topic a bunch. I've actually, I think, written all these articles. So if you find a typo, let me know. But we have a lot of articles to help you preserve your legacy and to think about it and to help you out.
Thanks, Elysian. I think that what a great piece of advice to get us started of start today. And I think all of you on this Zoom call or watching this webinar, gold star. I think just by logging onto this and acknowledging that this is something important, you have taken one step. You are already one step ahead. So kudos. Next up, I'd love to invite Jessie, one of the co-founders of Arthyve, to talk a little bit about their work and the important process of archiving for artists. Go ahead, Jessie.
Hi, thank you for having me on this panel discussion. This is something very near and dear to our hearts at Arthyve. So my name is Jessie de la Cruz. I'm an archivist. I've been working with arts and archives for the past 15 years. Worked at Denver Art Museum, History of Colorado, the Museo, and then I actually built the archive program from the ground up at the Clifford Still Museum. I'm now at Regis University as the University Archivist and Curator of Special Collections. But while I was at the Clifford Still Museum, I was there for 7 years, I really started to think more critically about the role of archives. And not just how Clifford Still preserved his art and had this catalog raisonné and had the entire estate, but how he was so cognizant about building an archive. And so, an archive is not just art, and it's not just the provenance and the exhibition history. That is so important. But what the archive was at the museum and what an artist archive can be is the side that humanizes you. So oftentimes when we go to an art museum or the Clifford Still Museum and we're walking around the galleries, we see the art first and we think about Clifford Still as a man second. When you really have a rich archive, you're thinking about him as a human first and then the artwork he created. And I think that's really important because people want to connect to the stories, right? The stories of our shared human our shared human narrative, right? So I started Arthyve in response to nobody was really actively working to preserve the living creative archives, of our artists in the city. And we have a motto that in Arthyve, you don't have to be dead to get in. And I say that, in the context of this talk, but, as an archivist, I often work with artists' estates in their archives after somebody has passed away. And I think Elysian, made a really good point that we need to be proactive now during our lives. And if you don't leave some really rich documentation to help describe your work or who you were as an artist, a curator is going to do that after you're gone. An art researcher is going to do that after you're gone. And so if you want to be intentional in how your work is interpreted and how you want people to not just view your artwork, but view who you are as a person, it's very important to start thinking about this now. And so, I think working on the catalog raisonné artwork archive is a really great resource, for that, to start building out the catalog raisonné. And then what we do at Arthyve, there's a couple of different things. I'm going to send out a link. This is a PDF called Artist Studio Archives, and this is going to start walking you through all that supplementary information, how to get going, the steps you can take. Arthyve, I can, do you mind if I share my screen? Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen here really quick. And hopefully, can everyone see this? This is our archive. And we collect, because we're trying to represent, we use the word creatives really loosely. So you could be a visual artist, you could be a performing artist, you could be a dancer, you could be a musician. We have one archive, ongoing living archive now called Our Story. And Our Story is about collecting the creative responses to our time during COVID in response to Black Lives Matter. So you can click on one of these, and this is an artist contributing this artwork he created. He gives an artist statement. There's a link to his website and a link to some articles. This is just little snapshots. But then we also have the artist archive. And this is really about being the author of your own narrative. So you will see, oh, of course, I'm so sorry. I took you to the wrong area. So these are called artist time capsules. And these are all the artists that are currently working with us. And I'm going to go to Jennifer Parisi. You could submit one time capsule once a year. And so this is Jennifer's artist time capsule from this time period. She has an artist statement. We have some questions. We have inspiration because we feel that the artist's inspiration is also very important. So they list the books that they're inspired by, music that they're inspired by, other artists. And then we have this oral history. So she does leave an oral history of her practice. And for this one, the person interviewing her is her partner. And we find that that's really important, is to have somebody close to the artist do the interview. And then we have a video diary. And in the video diary, Jennifer walks through all of the materials and gives context to the items that she submitted to the archive. And so there's that. And then here's some screenshots of some archival materials that she submitted to this time capsule. Outside of that, so anybody can contribute at any time. Our story is very short. It's just a synopsis of, submit your creative response to this time. And then there's the ongoing kind of living archive that we are creating. But then we also offer educational workshops and classes. At the end of March, we will be having an online class that you can sign up for and take at your own pace. The first one is Introduction to Archives. So it's very general, because I think a lot of us, the word archive is very odd. And so this actually kind of unpacks that a little bit more and gets into the history and the why and the importance. Then we have an introduction to studio archives that's using that artist studio workbook. It has tutorials, it has videos, and it will get you started with your archival practice. And then we are rolling out an intro to digital archives, because as creatives, we create a lot of digital content, and the preservation and care of those digital assets requires like a whole other system. So I think that's it. We also do programming as well, but we are really here as a resource. We are in service to our community. We are a nonprofit. So we are membership driven, but you can actually submit to the archive. There's no fee. We are really just trying to create more equitable representation of our artists across the state of Colorado, and to be here as a resource to you.
Thanks, Jessie. That's wonderful. I remember seeing the call for the original Our Story sort of invite, and it's wonderful to see some of the things that have already been included in that. Terrific. Next up, I'd like to invite Julie Ratner to the virtual microphone. Julie is an estate planning attorney. She's volunteered with CBCA and Colorado Attorneys for the Arts in the past, and we're very grateful for that. And will walk us through some tips and tricks and things to know about, just to wet your whistle on estate planning. We'll dive into a lot more of that during our panel, but go ahead, Julie, and take it away.
As Meredith said, I'm Julie Ratner. We did just recently bring on 2 new partners, so we're now Bryant, Ritsick, Symons, and Ratner. I'm a mouthful, so I still call it Symons and Ratner all the time. But I'm a volunteer attorney with CAFTA, which is Colorado Attorneys for the Arts. And, you know, if you are an artist and you need help with business formation or IP, anything from copyright to trademark, you know, and you don't have the funds to hire an attorney, definitely reach out to CAFTA, because that's what they're there for. They're here to help artists in our community. And I would love to work with artists, you know, on their estate plans as well. If they, after they hear this and they're like, wow, I really need to do this, I would be happy to help. So I'm going to share my screen, or I'm going to try to share my screen. How's that? You got it?
You got it.
Okay. So this just introducing myself, and this is not legal advice. So, you know, if you have follow-up questions, you can definitely email me. You know, estate planning for artists, I feel like the first 2 presenters really teed me up well, because I'm going to be talking about the legacy. So, you know, your legacy is what you leave on after you're gone, and we're all terminal, we're all going to pass. And so, you know, we talk about this with our clients all the time, and you know, your art is living on, but also the story, what story you want to tell, that will live on as well. And I feel like these different, you know, the archive and archive definitely could help artists with that. Because the first thing you really need to do with your art is you want to make sure you have a really good inventory. As we heard from the quote, your children, heirs, museums, they're not going to know what you have if there isn't some type of good cataloging, inventorying of that. And then also having a story for your work. What is your story? And where do you store your work? You want to compile your relevant contracts. So do you have licensing agreements out there that you need to take care of? What about your copyrights? Where are those? So all of that should be compiled to make it easier for the beneficiaries of your estate plan to know what you have and what its value is. Getting art appraised, I know, can seem very overwhelming, but I have met a lot of really great appraisers in Colorado that this is all that they do. And if you've donated or loaned your artwork or other works to museums or foundations or universities, make sure that you list that as well. And how long is that a permanent donation or is it for a certain number of years? And when you're identifying your work in your estate plan, it's good to have an inventory number, a title, or maybe a picture. I did have a client who went through their studio and took a picture of every single piece of art, which was great, and then put it in a notebook. What is your medium? Are you a visual artist? Are you a choreographer? Do you do different things? Most artists that I know can do a variety of things that I'm very jealous of. And when we talk about passing on the artwork or the work, whether it's visual art, photography, a painting, a dance, so choreography is part of that. There is the physical work, so the piece of art, if you will, and then there's also the intellectual property. These are two distinct things that you can leave as part of your estate plan. I may leave a painting to my son, but the rights to show that work or to copy that work, the copyright, to my daughter. So I can do different things with my artwork, and that's why you want to be very specific. And are you leaving them the intellectual property that goes with that work, or are you leaving them the work itself? And so you have to think about it as your entire estate, not just your bank accounts or your house, cars, jewelry, stocks, 401ks. It also is going to include that art. And within that art, there are many different rights that you can leave to your beneficiaries. The copyright code came into effect, and your copyright is going to last 70 years after the life of the artist. So that's, after that, it becomes fair use. It's in the public domain. And there are definitely a lot of exceptions to that, but we're not going to delve into copyright. That's for a different class under CBCA, which I'm sure that Meredith could send you if you wanted to take one of those. When we talk about what you can copyright, literary works, musical works, choreography, pictures, graphic and sculptural works, motion pictures, audiovisual, dramatic works, pantomime, architectural works, sound recordings. When I dropped my dog off at daycare today, there was a guy who was doing artwork on a brick wall. Like, all of that can be copyrighted. So there are two different types of vehicles for an estate plan. You have your will, so a last will and testament, and then you have a trust. A lot of artists don't want to do a will-based estate plan because then it's in the public domain, it's public for everyone to see. And a lot of artists kind of want to keep what they're doing with their art and the value of their art private. And so a trust can avoid that process. And you want to make sure in your will or trust, again, you're identifying all of your works, your inventory and how you identify it in your estate planning documents. Those things should match. And, I've had clients who have done a trust and they say, the inventory is on Schedule A. So you're just completely updating every year. You're looking at Schedule A. Do I need to add any other pieces that I've done? Do I need to take anything off that I've sold and didn't keep any rights to? So you want to make sure that all of those things are, easily identifiable. And again, remember that the copyright contains a bundle of rights that your heirs can inherit separately. And why are trusts better for artists? Well, really, it's just because, a trust can shield the estate from creditor claims, from heirs that are going to try to take things to court because there will not be a court proceeding. It's easier for the trustee to manage. And in a lot of my trust, we do what's called a cultural consultant, and that's really an appraiser so that the heirs aren't trying to guess the value of the art. There's someone who is in the industry that comes in and really helps with, the inventory, looking at appraising the art, and working with the family or the foundation or the museum and getting all of that stuff taken care of. There a lot of times I have artists say, I just want to donate it to a nonprofit or a charity. Keep in mind that a lot of people want to do that. And if you are going to do that, you may consider, in addition to leaving them all the tool, a university, you just say you want to leave them all the tools that you've used in your studio and some of the art. It'd be good to also leave them a nice IRA so that they have the funds to keep that legacy going. Some artists want to start their own foundation. What I've found is you need at least $2 million in assets to do an artist endowed foundation, and that's at the bare minimum. And questions that you should ask yourself. So this is really what I want to leave you with. And again, this PowerPoint will be emailed to anyone who wants it as a PDF. So because I know I've kind of gone through quickly with this, but ask yourself these questions. How do you want to be remembered? Do you want your work presented, collected, or sold? Do you want to intend for your work to generate income for others? So do you want your family to be able to sell your artwork so that they can have the funds and not the art? Who do you want to be in charge? So who do you want to handle your estate? And, the big question is, do you have an inventory of all the works you've created, sold, or donated? Do you have a complete list of your copyrights? If not, you certainly can go to the copyright website. They have a list of those, but it'd be good if you had one. Do you have backups or hard copies of your digital works? Do you have an agent or a manager and an attorney that you work with that you would want your heirs to reach out to? And does your preservation plan really describe who you are and the unique care that you have for your whole, life as an artist that you have used to maintain your work? Do you have a way that that's going to be able to be carried on? And so I know when we get to the panel that we're going to have questions coming, but my email is up here. If you want to jot it down. I don't charge for phone calls or emails, so I'm happy. I really love artists. I love to support artists. I wish I were an artist, but that's not the gift God gave me. So you certainly can email me any questions you have. I'm always happy to answer them. And if I don't, I know where I can point you in the right direction to get those answered. So thank you again, Meredith, for putting this on. And I'm going to unshare my screen now.
Thank you, Julie. That was awesome. And yes, I'm sure we will be diving into many of those points deeper as we go. Lastly, as always, we're not just talking about artists, we want them to be part of the conversation. So we have invited Caroline Douglas, who is an incredible visual artist, sculptor, one of the most imaginative artists I know I've had the pleasure of encountering, to be on this panel, share a little bit about her work and her perspective. So we have a couple visuals to share of her beautiful pieces, and would like to invite her just to give an introduction. Go ahead, Caroline.
Thank you so much, Meredith. And wow, thank you so much to all the other panelists. You have kind of like overwhelmed my brain. I was taking notes and feel like there's a lot to be learned from each one of you, from what you've said. I am a sculptor. I have been doing sculpture and paintings and other different mediums for, well, almost 50 years. That's a little scary thought. I have made lots of work. I think that in a lot of articles that have been written about me, the word that's most repeated is prolific. And I used to not like that word. I wanted something like elegant or stunning or at least something, but prolific was, and now I've sort of embraced that word and realized that for myself, being a prolific artist has helped me to really grow and expand and learn all kinds of different techniques and explore all kinds of different things. So I'm appreciative for that word prolific. As far as this panel goes and talking about the legacy of my artwork, since the last panel that we had, I've done some thinking about that, and I have started cataloging every piece of work. I do have photos of everything. Yay, I know, right? So I write down the collector's name, the title, the date it was sold, and I'm kind of proud of that. I still have tons of work in the past that I have no clue where it is, but you know, we're starting where we are. I have, you know, pieces in museums. I have copyrights. I have, you know, those kind of things, and have had shows and curator articles written. I just have never really written them all down in one place. So I love what you all are saying about how you support artists in providing that service. It's a great one for me because as an artist, I'd much rather be in the studio, honestly, you know. And I can see you all shaking your heads, so you understand. I have so much work in my house right now. I've been making work this year, like to keep my sanity. And and also I want to just mention that in the past several years, I've really gotten involved with social media. And I feel like that virtual platform has helped me keep better records or track of my work and my creative process and my teaching techniques and that whole thing. So I think that there is a place, you know, where I could pull together a lot of information just because I have been doing social media. And I think it's an amazing platform these days for artists to use for exposure, also sales, invitations, residencies around the world. I've been invited to Latvia and Serbia and all around. So I am, up to now, I had been hoping that my kids would want to take over and, you know, be willing to like go forward with selling artwork or working with museums, hopefully, maybe, or whatever. I think my daughter might be interested in that. But I'm also now, the wheels are turning as far as, you know, maybe there is something else I need to dive more deeply into. As you can see, I am a sort of magic realist in my artwork, and I feel, well, I'm just honored that I was asked to contribute to this group. I feel like from the artist standpoint, I love to know that there are services out there that can help me organize myself and not make myself go into overwhelm so that I can continue making my artwork. I think that's about all I have to say.
Thanks, Caroline.
Yeah.
I love looking at your pieces. I think they're just so creative.
Thank you.
Well, with that, we'll transition into our panel, and you're sort of my first question here. Is a lot of what we've talked about or have sort of teed up is what happens to your work once it's done, and then once it's out into the world, whether that's on social media, in a gallery, in a collection, being purchased. And as a prolific artist, as you've now claimed for yourself, can you talk a little bit about what happens to you once you're done with a piece? What happens to that emotional connection? How do you feel once a piece is done and sort of given to the world?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, it depends. You know, sometimes it's a deep, powerful, profound piece that is really moving to me and is part of my own healing transformation. And those I tend to hold on to a little longer. But once they're sold, I'm ready to let go. I move on to the next important piece. And then in the meantime, I create all kinds of things that are just fun, like knitting. I create for my sanity. I create for all kinds of different reasons and different creative processes lead me to that. But I think for me, I think actually being prolific makes it easier to let go of it emotionally. I do see pieces from years past and I am like, wow, and have like heartstrings pulled, but I'm very happy to see it where it is living. It's kind of like I loved it through its birth and can let it go.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
My next question, I think I'd like to start with Jessie or Elysian. Julie gave us that great list of questions, really more geared towards sort of your estate plan and that piece. I'm curious for you all, what are some of the questions you think artists should be asking when they think about their legacy, perhaps from a more academic sense, or some of those sort of non-tangible pieces? We're gonna sort of oscillate between the head and the heart a lot in this conversation. So maybe more in the heart space. What are some of those questions you think artists should be asking themselves? And either of you can go
Good
first.
question. Do you want to go first, Elysian? Then I can go after.
Yeah, sure. I'm glad you asked that question because as the presentations have been continuing, it was a reminder of why you gave us 5 minutes, because I could go on forever, right? And I think one of those pieces is the information, or the things, or the feelings, the moments, the physical processes that go into making the work, that, like was said, are felt and experienced by you and won't necessarily be known, felt, experienced by a curator, or a gallerist, or whomever it may be. And so social media was mentioned. And so Caroline, that was a really great point. If we think about like there's the archive of like the provenance and the details and the information to preserve, like what exhibitions the piece was in, what awards it has won, where it was on loan and exhibited, if it was at the university next door, all of that tangible information. But your process and your creation, your innovation, your inspiration, even before the work has hit canvas or a potter's wheel, is also part of that narrative. And so if you're doing Instagram stories or time lapses of you creating the works, Instagram stores that in an archive as well. But what we would recommend is also storing it all in one cohesive place, an archive, to digitize it. And luckily with digital records, it's very easy to download or upload, whatever it may be. And so you have that time lapse of a painting being made attached to that painting record. You have the paint samples or the other sculpture with the Arthyve. I love the inspirations that come from music and just like day-to-day life, to have those pieces of your story. And then the other part of it, and I can go on and on, so I'm gonna let Jessie jump in. But the other part is you as an artist have grown. Like Caroline, speaking to your breadth of work and your prolific work, the work that you made 30 years ago is different, perhaps, from the work today. My father's in his 70s, and I would think about his portfolio, how it has changed. So being able to show that over time with the physical works, but also your artist statements. If you have journals, the musings that you are writing about where you are in the world that you are in, especially when we look back at COVID, decade, 20 years from now, the society and culture that we're in today too also plays a big part in how we respond to that as individual artists will always be different and be part of our story rather than just like a history book. And I think,
You want to build on that?
I too can go on forever about this. I mean, this is my passion, and this is where my heart is. Not only in helping artists preserve their legacies and their stories, and that your story matters and has importance, but I also think about the power dynamics that are within an archive. And more often than not, archives have been maintained and preserved by people in power. And they have really only documented one perspective. There's a reason why a lot of female artists don't have the same representation, and there's a reason why we don't know as much as we should about all the artists of color that were working during the abstract expressionist period. So also having an agency in your own archival practice is also challenging who and what deserves to be preserved. So I am throwing that little political slant in there. But then I got off on a tangent, and I should probably come back more to the question, which is, now I might need a recap, Meredith.
I mean, you're absolutely touching on it, of just what are some of those other questions, thinking about, and perhaps from sort of an academic sense, because I know that's a space that you've been in, that artists should be asking themselves now about what they want their legacy to be.
Yeah, I think two things. One, I think I want everyone to engage in an archival practice, because you are not just preserving your legacy, you are helping to shape our historic record. You are helping to shape how we view this world during the time of COVID. How are we going to look back in 100 years and understand where we were at as creatives during the time of COVID? And so it's important to even think beyond yourself and beyond your practice. That's all very important, but also you're contributing to our shared collective historic record. And I think there's a sense of humanity and like a sense of social good in that too, when you think of that. And on that, I think it's very important on some level. And I've been encouraging artists or creatives, I use the word kind of broadly, if it sounds too daunting to, catalog everything, to, start diving in. One, I'm going to share on here this Artist Studio Archive workbook, and actually Artwork Archive is mentioned in there as a resource for you. But this is also is going to give you little small projects to get going. It also will give you guidelines on how to reach out and hire a studio assistant to do this work. Arthyve actually works on a consulting basis too. So if you do need consulting to set up your archival practice, you could reach out to us. But even outside of that, oral histories. The power of oral histories and the human, that's the human breath. So if you want somebody to connect to you as a human, leaving an oral history behind, so in 100 years somebody can go back and listen to you, is huge. So if you could start doing, think of them as diaries, to give some sort of narrative and perspective to who you are. And so I think my major thing is everyone should be part of archiving. Doesn't matter if you're an artist or creative, everyone has a story to share. Everyone has a role in shaping our historical shared record. And think of how you want people to view you, to see you, to know you 100 years from now, and make sure you're leaving that narrative in the story, creating more of a three-dimensional perspective of you as an artist, not just the artwork, but what is that human connection?
Thanks, Jessie.
Can I jump in on that? Can I just add on? I don't know if we're allowed to back and forth. Sorry, that was a very spastic move for everyone that just saw my video. But that brought up two things. So with Artwork Archive, I mentioned we also help collectors and collecting institutions manage their artworks. And with collectors, when we talk to them about inventorying, digitizing, archiving for preserving their legacy and their estate, their trust, whatever it may be, it's so amazing and heartwarming about yes, artwork is bought for an investment, but there's also just the love for the artwork, the love for the artist, their relationship with that artist, and the narrative around that. And so thinking about essentially like archiving and keeping that story so that you help others share it and learn it, and so that the collector's child may know why that's a cherished work between the artist and the collector. And the other thing at Artwork Archive and with the work that Arthyve's doing is controlling your story, your narrative, and how you are being represented. You don't have to be shown in the Met in order to be a valuable contributor to our cultural heritage and to our art history. And I think that's one of the things that we are trying to rectify, that it's not just the voices of a particular group that are being shared. And so by participating in this, you are being proactive and doing your part to share yourself with the future.
I love that. I made a joke at the beginning that I made a sarcastic comment that we were going to have an uplifting conversation about death, divorce, and downsizing. And what you all are sharing is so empowering. I feel empowered, and I feel like that's a wonderful takeaway or through line for this conversation is really the opportunity to take control from a very logistical sense, but also from a much bigger one about your story. Next up, sort of turning back to Julie, I want to see if we can dive a little bit deeper into some of those tools, some of those pieces. So we said, okay, get started today. If someone says, okay, I should think about my estate plan or something like that, what's next? What are the first steps? What are some of the tools that artists should start putting in place?
I think that, obviously archiving your work or registering your work, or at least if you don't have the bandwidth to do that, at least make a list yourself. That's really your first step, because you can't give away, or bequeath is the word we used, your creative works if you don't even have a proper list for them. So if you come and sit in my office, the first thing I'm going to ask is, do you have a list of all of this artwork? Just like I would ask you, do you have a list of your bank accounts, or who are your beneficiaries on things? So, there's a little pre-work that needs to be done that we've talked about here before you come and sit down with an attorney to get your documents done. Then the next thing I think is where people really get held up is what you want done with your creative works. Do you want to donate them? There was a story that I read in Rolling Stone where the partner in the Beastie Boys, he did not want any of his music when he died. In his will, none of it could be used for ads. Right? So he was very specific in what he wanted his creative work used for. So I think knowing if you want to be philanthropic, or knowing if you want your children to inherit the artwork so that they can sell it. I know a lot of artists that I meet with are concerned that their kids are just going to throw everything in a box, stick it in an attic, and it breaks their heart. So you definitely want to put someone in charge, even if you leave it to those children who don't appreciate it. Put someone in charge who knows the value of your art. So again, come into my office, have a good list, know who you want to be in charge of distributing your assets. You can have someone that distributes the creative works different than someone who's distributing your bank accounts and selling your house and those types of things. And so I think, Meredith, to answer your question, it's really good to think about those things before you sit down with me. And I do have a questionnaire specifically for the creative clients that we have, because it asks about copyright, it asks about trademark, it asks about agents and other attorneys that you may work with, because I think sending that questionnaire to the creative clients ahead of time is going to help them answer those questions before they even sit down with me.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump ahead because I know we have someone who's on the call who has to leave in a minute or two, who works for a university, who has probably received or had people ask about donating works of art. Julie, any advice you can give on that process, either from the artist or from the institution standpoint, about oh, I'll just donate all my work to my alma mater.
Right. Definitely. So you definitely want to talk to that university first. So I think someone was, Tanya, I don't know if she's on here. She works for the University of Denver in their development group. So you want to contact them ahead of time and make sure that they have the capability to take your artwork, first of all. And are you giving it to them to show, or are you donating your tools to their art department that you use in your sculpting or painting? You know, are they going to be able to take that? I had a client who really wanted her art to be donated. So she donated all of her art to nursing homes around Colorado. So you go into Brookdale and Boulder and her artwork is all in the halls and it's so beautiful, right? I mean, she had a plan. She talked to all the corporations that had these different nursing homes ahead of time. And so it played out beautifully, right? Because she had a plan.
Terrific. Thank you. I see some other questions in the chat. Know that I am noticing them. I want to go through some of our other pre-prepared questions, and then I'll shift to those, but know that I'm looking at it. I want to talk a little bit about your team. I feel like a few of you have mentioned a studio assistant or an attorney, or maybe your tax consultant. Who else, and I'll throw this out to all of you, who else should be on the artist's team when it comes to this conversation, either, you know, contractually or a sounding board, someone else they should be talking to? Who else needs to be involved in this conversation? Whoever wants to chime in first.
Well,
go ahead, Jessie.
To answer the team part, and just to back up a little bit, going through having that list, going through, putting together a catalog raisonné, going through and having those questions put together is going to make it a lot easier to approach your family members and be like, hey, I really need your help and support. Like, my mom is an artist and creative, and she's wonderful, and she's so flighty and all over the place and always wants me to step in. And I'm like, Mom, I need you to do your work first. I need you to slow down and write everything out, and then we'll get going. And so just putting it out there before you start bringing in a team of people, make sure too that you're a little bit grounded in your work and your creative practice. And so you do have, your catalog raisonné. You've kind of thought about, if you want to approach a university or if you want to approach an art institution. And I have some comments about that as well. Having, currently working in both areas, you need to kind of get your ducks lined up too. And I think Julie mentioned this as well, even before going to a lawyer. So before bringing on the whole team, make sure you kind of have a vision and make sure you kind of have your ducks in a row. Otherwise, you're going to create a lot more confusion, and it's not going to go as seamlessly as you would hope.
Yeah, you want to ship that people want to jump into, right? That jump out of. I can piggyback off of that, because I was going to say that was wonderful, and that also that your team may also be different depending on where you are in your career and age and lifetime. And so what we see at Artwork Archive is for the younger emerging artists doing, they're archiving it, doing it on their own. Then fast forward, if you have a partner, we've seen a lot of partners signing up for Artwork Archive, being like, I need to organize my wife's artworks. And we're like, you're the best partner in the entire world. But then we also see artists who are getting interns from the local school to help catalog. And back in the day when we could be standing next to each other, going through the studio and taking photos and uploading. And then to Julie's point, the team continues to build as you're looking down the road, talking to appraisers for the value of your artwork, talking to conservators to get treatment plans attached to your pieces so people know if it's a painted sculpture, what paint to use when 10 years from now it chips. And that whomever you're bequeathing the collection to, who may need access to it or just needs information sent to. So if it's the university that you have spoken to and have agreed upon that your artworks fit within their collection plan, then they will take it. Having that person being part of the team, but probably for a short amount of time, right? Versus your family member who will be seeing the copyright, the licensing throughout years to come.
Julie, anyone else to add to the team?
I'm trying to just answer some of these questions that I can answer in the side. So
thank you.
I don't want to get off topic, but I just wanted to mention something really quick about donating your estate to a university or an arts museum.
Yeah.
I often hear this, and as an archivist at a university, we often have artists that come in and say they want to donate everything, or at art museums. The amount of collection space and funding that these institutions have is very small. And so one, having everything lined up beforehand before you approach those institutions is going to do you well. But two, if that's really important to you, setting aside somehow in your creative practice, as a professional artist, setting aside some funding to hand over the gift of artwork with some small funding to hire an archivist or someone to catalog or someone to do that preservation is going to go a long way if that's really what you want. And I know that's hard. I talk to so many artists and they're like, but I don't have a lot of money. You're a business professional. You have to somehow figure out how to factor that in if it's important, because it's going, if that's important to you. Because like I said, these institutions don't have a lot of space. They don't have a lot of funding and human resources. So if that's important, setting aside a small stipend or some funding to preserve those works is going to go a long way. And then the other part too, I want to mention is this idea of like all the invisible labor that goes on behind the artist's legacy. And a lot of people rely on students and interns. And again, I think that's great if there's like a practicum. A practicum is 120 hours that you have to do in college. But I am really trying to encourage artists and arts institutions to really honor and put a value behind that person's time and work. I spent $120,000 on my education. We are all, I think it's important, again, if you have $7 an hour that you can pay for that student to feed themselves while they're supporting your work. I think that's really important to think of as well, because there is value in that too. That's all.
I had an unpaid internship, graduate internship at the MFA Boston, and it was essentially like you're getting paid for prestige and to have this line on your resume.
Exactly. Yeah. And I went through that myself, but I don't think it's healthy if we say that artists need to be paid for their work, the invisible labor and the people that are supporting those artists also need to be paid for that work. And so I think we need to start promoting that as a creative field.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Jessie. I'm curious, Caroline, as we're talking about a team, do you have a team? Is this something that you're like, yeah, I've got people who can help me, or like, no, it's just kind of me. They can make beautiful things.
At this point, yeah, thanks, Meredith. Yeah, at this point, it's kind of just me, trying to catalog and take a photo of everything. And, I have had apprentices, I've had interns, I have, back in the day. And at that point, instead of having them help me make or, mix the glazes, maybe I should have thought I could have helped, gain support in a different way. Now I know. But this is just really making me think more about one step at a time. As far as a team member goes, I probably won't reach out for anything until, after COVID.
Sure.
But yeah, thanks for the poke.
That's all right. I appreciate you speaking up. If you're like, that's a good question. I've never asked myself that question that my fellow panelists just said I should be asking myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything maybe you've heard so far that you're like, oh my God, like any light bulbs?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, so many things, just mainly the first thing that I'm latching onto is to really a legible catalog that is in one place, not post-it notes, The second thing is really one thing that I forgot to mention as far as my legacy goes is a book. I have a book on Amazon. I'm working on a second one. I feel like that is I could use some team support, editing, that kind of thing, so I'm going to be reaching out.
Good.
So
good. Well, there are a few questions that are coming up in the chat that I want to sort of move away from what we had sort of outlined before, because I think these are really great questions and I want to make sure we honor them. One of them came in a little bit earlier. Other than inventory documentation, this is from Norwood, who I believe is joining us from Tennessee. Other than inventory documentation, what can an artist do now to support the possibility of rise of value and longevity of the value of their work? Sort of thinking about appreciation from a financial stance of their work during their lifetime and afterwards. And this might be maybe Julie would be good to start this, but anyone can chime in. Do you need me to read that again?
Yeah, I was looking for who asked it, so I was gonna. It's just, I think getting an appraisal on the artwork is really important. Finding someone who can do an appraisal. That's always the joke. It's more valuable after you're gone because then the supply is done and demand is still going up. But I think, having an appraisal when you make the creative work, and then definitely an appraisal when you pass. That's one of the first things for tax purposes, as well as just so if you're dividing. And so if I'm dividing an estate among 10 different heirs, how do I know what each person is going to get if I don't know the value of what I am distributing? And so I'm not sure if that really answers the question.
Yeah. And one thing that's sort of light bulb for me of like, you may need to get your work appraised at different points in your career.
As you become more well-known, right?
Yeah. And documenting that in the great resources that we've just outlined. Any other comments on sort of that financial appreciation?
I will say in the PDF I sent, it covers this as well. But even if you're early on, in your studio practice or mid or later, wrangling everything together and getting your studio practice organized and creating documentation in an archive creates more value for your work. It's also a great way to bring in, if you're applying for grants, it's a great way to bring in investors, because they can come in and they can look at you could do a studio visit, but then you can also show that documentation. So being organized actually can help you get ahead, to apply for grants and to bring in potential collectors as well. So I guess just going back to getting organized.
I'm gonna piggyback off on the getting organized one. Is that like the art market? It's a very hard thing to figure out, value of art, right? And that appraisers' jobs are very challenging because they're looking at the time the artwork was made. They're comparing you to other artists that are making similar works. There's a lot of things that are being involved, but you can't control what other people are making, but you can control your inventory and how you are cataloging your entire career, your body of work. So having a comprehensive record of all of the similar sized medium artworks that's similar to that one painting, what it has been sold for or been on retail sale in other galleries. So there is a record of not just that one painting, but how it fits into your entire body of artworks, because your artwork's value changes after you pass, because you can't make, another seascape that's 4x3 or like, or another mural or whatever it may be. And so having a record of how many you made, at what size, at what price, also helps the keep record and value your artwork.
Yeah, sorry, one more quick thing. The provenance of your artwork and making sure you traffic all of that during your lifetime is going to make that work more valuable. There's been many times at the Clifford Still Museum where people approached us and it looked like a Clifford Still. It had the signature, it looked like it. One, as a museum, we couldn't give it an appraisal. But two, we didn't have it in the catalog raisonné. So we couldn't traffic that provenance. Therefore, according to us, we would say, we don't see it in the catalog raisonné. So somebody could be sitting on something that's worth millions of dollars, but because that provenance wasn't included in his catalog raisonné, we couldn't vouch for it. So I think this idea of value, it's hard because you have to do things during your life, but you also have to think of your legacy you have to think of it beyond your life. And so if that's important to you, which is hard because you want to live and feed yourself while you're living, but value, the word value that's a tough one. It's a real tough one.
Yeah.
But I guess going back to trafficking and provenance, there's so much value in that. If you can't trace that object's life, it's pretty hard to put a monetary value on that and to get an appraisal.
Great, thank you all. There's a question in here from Andy, who is joining us from Minnesota, I happen to know, with a question about sort of rural artists, and particularly a lot of what we talked about is leveraging technology to help us get organized. Well, if you're either advanced in age and that feels daunting, or you're in a rural community that just maybe doesn't have good bandwidth, what are some maybe more analog tools, or how best to work with some of these more rural artists who could also be isolated? Maybe there isn't someone in their community who understands this kinds of stuff. What maybe ideas or advice for them? Go ahead, Jessie, you seem eager, but again,
mind if I jump in? I saw this question. It's a great question. And I've actually been working with a team of artists in Telluride that are in a very similar situation. Starting with a physical object file. So, going through, figuring out, assigning an object number to all of your creative works, and then putting together an object file that has any sort of documentation, sketches, any sort of inspiration, a photograph of the work. You can even send, there's different ways, even if you aren't using digital. I mean, you can still get disposable cameras and take a picture and mail it off to get, physical prints. But to create a physical, tangible object file of that relates to that artwork, and you can start doing that at home. And if you need more guidance on that, feel free to reach out and I can walk you through that. But definitely creating a physical object files for all of your artworks. That includes, not just the artwork, but the materials that help support the creation of that artwork.
Anyone else want to chime in on this one?
And I would say if creating Artwork Archive, we're an online database system, like it's cloud-based tools. And the reason why we're cloud-based is actually our founder, John, co-founder, John, built Artwork Archive for his mom 10 years ago because her hard drive crashed. So she lost all of her information, sales. And so at the time when she was looking for a database system, they were just all really expensive, clunky, or like, and so he built Artwork Archive as a cloud-based solution. So we have seen, fires, Surf Plus. If I'll write it down in the chat. Surf Plus is a really wonderful nonprofit based out of Vermont, and they help artists protect their studios because that's part of your legacy, right? We've talked about materials and such. But if you are going to have physical records because you don't have broadband, if you don't have the network, then to put it into a safe and make sure that, things on the floor, if you have a big rainstorm, even here in Colorado, we saw in 2014 with the floods, you don't want those records to be destroyed. So if you do have physical records, just making sure you're preserving them by elevating them off the floor, putting them in safes, doing whatever you can to preserve. And then I would say that work with what you have, right? So in a perfect world, you have an online database system, it's cloud-based. You have a backup and an external hard drive if you want some extra security. The other piece is that we work with organizations too. It's extra time, but maybe if there's an arts league or an arts organization and someone who would be willing to go out into the community to collect those oral histories, and that art organization becomes your repository for the archive too. And so looking to other groups that may have resources that you don't have.
Anyone else want to chime in on this one? I'm keeping an eye on the time. We plan to go till 1, and you all are just such wonderful, rich resources of information. So I'm going to keep asking questions until we hit that 1 o'clock mark. There was a question earlier in the chat from Evan and Julie. I know, thank you for noticing that and responding related to copyrights. And I think I'd like to just expand that a little bit because, as someone mentioned earlier, we could do 3.5 hours just on copyright. But we've talked a lot about the physical objects and where the physical objects go and how to protect them. But as artists, there is this intangible property, your intellectual property that's associated with these works. And maybe Julie, we'll kick it to you first to sort of, what should we think of, what should artists be thinking about to protect that intellectual property, which, as you outlined earlier, can be protected entirely separately from that physical object? So any tips or advice to get people thinking about that?
Yes. And so, Evan's question was good. Yes, when you create a piece of art, or when I write a song, definitely when I put pen to paper or paintbrush to canvas, that work is covered under copyright. However, in order to really enforce that, to give it teeth, you need to register your copyright. So registering the copyright with the Copyright Office or your trademark, but most creative people, they end up doing a little of both, right? Is very important to protect that. And you can give someone the power in your will to be able to license that copyright if it is registered, and to be able to license it, have other people use that, the print or whatever, advertising or however they may want to reproduce it, and still keep the original physical piece. Anything you'd like to add, co-counsel?
Julie has a ringer in the room.
I have a ringer. So I actually have a copyright attorney, and he is here with me today just because he's married to me. So, he has to be. So if he, do you want to add anything to that?
Hello, I'm Dave Ratner. I think it is sometimes it's really easy to get confused between the physical item and the intellectual property. Because both are valuable. But an easy example is that the painting example Julie was just using, if you sell a painting, you're selling the physical item, not the copyright. The copyright remains with the owner. And if you are the painter, if you're the creator of the copyright, you are likely the owner of the copyright. And so it's often just remember to think about that. Even if you write a book and you license that book to a publisher, you paint a painting or you create a sculpture and you sell that physical work, that doesn't mean you've given up your copyright. You still retain the ownership of that copyright. And that is something that still should be everything else you've been talking about today, archived and can be disposed of, transferred, assigned, etc. So just keeping that distinction is important as well.
So that's another thing your beneficiaries could receive as well. And I think, Julie, you even gave this example of you can give the painting to one child, but the copyright on that painting to another child. I don't recommend that. That seems like a hot mess. But is that
well, you could give the copyright to your agent too, right? If you have an agent who's going to do a good job of, selling licenses or whatever, your kids may not be sophisticated enough to do that, but they may want that piece hanging on their wall.
And to an earlier comment about value and financial appreciation, having your work be able to be sort of licensed after your life, is that a way that maybe your beneficiaries could continue to profit off your work in that sense?
Yeah, so if you're, I think in building a trust plan, you can have the agent who's in charge of licensing, that and making money, a profit, income generated for the trust. And then that income goes out to the beneficiaries after the expenses are paid, right? Because as we have heard, none of this stuff is free to do, right? And so I think having, as it was said, especially if you're donating the art to or any other creative work to a university, foundation, museum, leaving that museum, foundation, university as a beneficiary on your IRA is a great way to give, because then they don't have to pay any taxes on it like your kids would have. So, and I'm just, I'm always trying to make my clients be more philanthropic. So, there are good ways that are beneficial to them to do that as well. See, I think we could do Ratner and Ratner Law Firm, but he doesn't want to join forces with me for some reason.
You guys are quite the team. Thank you, Dave, for stepping in. Yeah, Elysian, I can see you.
I was going to say, okay, so I'm dealing with my dad's artwork, right? So like, I'm going to be like, given my role, like, even though I'm third in line of the kids, I'm going to handle his artwork. Isn't there a cap in how much donations or charitable giving you can give per year? So it's also the planning out throughout your lifetime if you're going to give away artworks, or am I incorrect in that, Julie?
So there's no limit in how much I can gift to a nonprofit. So if I wanted to donate all of my works to a university, I could do that all in my lifetime. There is no cap. But if your work has been appraised and there is an actual value on it from an IRS standpoint, I cannot gift. So whether it's cash, artwork, property, which IP is property, so think of it as your personal property, I cannot gift away more than $15,000 to one individual in a year. So if I have a co-owner, then we could gift 30,000. But to nonprofits, it's sky's the limit. And that's why a lot of people like to gift things of value during their lifetime to reduce their taxable estate. Although a taxable estate, just because we're on that, is 11 million per person right now. So, very few artists I come in contact with in Colorado would value their estate at $11 million.
If only.
If we paid artists like we paid football players, then yes, which we should do, right? And teachers. And I don't want to get on my soapbox, so I'm going to stop talking.
Oh my gosh, I just enjoy this amazing group so much. So we are nearly at time, and what I'd like to do is give each of our amazing panelists a chance just to share a final thought or piece of advice or even a takeaway they've had themselves to leave us all with, and we're going to go in the reverse order than we did at the beginning. So we're going to go Caroline, Julie, Jessie, Elysian. So just any final thoughts from this conversation or that you want to share? Caroline.
Yeah, okay. I am kind of overwhelmed a little bit with all the inspiration. But I'm going to actually start with trying to, I honestly, I am born to create art. And so I am now seeing the very valuable aspect of considering the business and marketing aspect of my life as equal to the creative side. So I'm going to approach the business side creatively. And maybe the catalog is going to have doodles on all the corners, or, we'll see what happens, but I'm going to make it a work of art. How's that?
I love that. That's wonderful. Thank you. Julie, how about you?
I was just going to say, it's an honor to be able to, be on the panel with all these creative people. And, as an artist and whatever work you create, you don't have to have an $11 million estate to do any of this. You don't really have to have started selling your artwork to do this. A lot of people think, oh, well, when I have enough money, I'll do my estate plan, or when, I really am a big name as an artist, I'll do my estate plan then. It's best start now. And then as your estate grows, you already have the framework in place. So don't be fooled into thinking I need to have a very large, catalog already before I can work on my estate plan.
Thanks, Julie. How about
Welcome.
you? Oh, go ahead, Jessie.
I just put in a little
little
snippet in the chat. I think anytime we talk about this work, it could be incredibly overwhelming. I often get overwhelmed as an archivist as well. Like, where do you start? And so I love the SMART, approach, creating SMART goals. And so maybe if your SMART goal is to have numbers, inventory numbers for every one of your artworks. So I think looking at this work and creating SMART goals, and SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, and time bound. And I think approaching this work one little snippet at a time, rather than thinking of the big beast it is, it just one SMART goal at a time, I think, to get going. And again, that workbook, and I know some links that Elysian posted, really outlines that too, like, where do you start? And then something, if you all are very interested, and you contribute to the Our Story archive, it's really just, you fill out a Google form, you upload some artwork, and then you're part of our shared collective history of Colorado during this time. And then if you want representation as an artist on an individual level, you can create an artist time capsule, and then you can work with Elysian too in starting to develop that catalog raisonné. Those are 3 small measurable, goals that you can put a time frame on and to get going.
Wonderful, thank you. And last, but very much not least, Elysian.
Yeah, so what I'm left with is this conversation, this panel would be mute and, wouldn't exist if it weren't for the artwork that you're making. So big goal is to give artists the time and emotional, mental, physical, spiritual space to create art. And so when we talked about the team, like here at Artwork Archive, we would love to be part of your team. The big part about our platform is to take away a lot of the admin so that you can go back into the studio and doing what you love. But it doesn't have to be Artwork Archive. I think what was outlined by Jessie with these like SMART goals, like finding a system that works for you, Excel spreadsheet, Artwork Archive, some other guys that do similar stuff. But, finding a system that works for you so that you can go back, so you can do the thing that you are born to do, and that is your passion, and that is to create and to make our world a better place. And the one thing I just want to leave everyone here with is that here at Artwork Archive, here personally, I just want to say thank you during COVID and during 2020 for what you are doing and contributing to our world and making a really challenging time a better time and a better place through your creativity. So thank you.
Ah, wonderful. Yes, thank you.
Hey,
Thank
Meredith,
you.
can I just added to the chat room a file of a PDF of the estate plan, the PowerPoint that I went through. But if someone can't open it or whatever, I'm happy to also email it out.
Thank you.
Anyone that wants it.
Yes.
If you guys want to capture it and send it.
You bet. There were lots of different resources. I even have some others that weren't even mentioned here. So we'll make sure you get all of that. Everyone who registered today will also get a follow-up survey from the Boulder County Arts Alliance. So keep an eye out in your email boxes for some additional materials. Thank you to our amazing panel. Thank you to Boulder County Arts Alliance and the City of Lafayette and the Lafayette Cultural Arts Commission for helping us to present today's presentation. We are so grateful for this amazing community of creatives and creative service organizations. As Elysian said, bringing us joy and hope and inspiration always, but in particular at this time. So I'd like to wish you all a good rest of your day. And thanks again for joining us. We'll see you. Bye.
Thanks so much to all.